Okay, today I'm going to continue on with still the issue of, let's see, class and the American dream. What is really class? You know, Nancy Isenberg claims it's economic stratification created by wealth and privilege. And then each generation pursues its own definition of happiness, unfettered by restraints of birth. So those are kind of my two contentions about what class really is. And this kind of gets into the antiquated, you know, before it was by birth, bloodline, and who your family was. And it is important. It's important to have social mobility because you shouldn't be constrained by, you know, the sins of the father and the mother that are revisited on their offspring, and have the opportunity to break out of that. And oh my goodness, you know, that's what equal opportunity is about, on merit. You know, if you are intelligent, if you are industrious, and it doesn't have to be this academic PhD, let's sit around and debate all of these different issues, and let's just give it a different acronym and try and debate and you know, the great philosophers, and try and become some great philosopher ourselves. I mean, I've always been, you know, with one of the good classes at Cobham where I blew my classmates away. I mean, the teacher was like, because I got one of these like extraordinary grades, and you know, I wasn't the A student. I was, you know, I wasn't never in with the in crowd, but I was in with, you know, people who wanted to live a little. And that's what you should be doing, as well as your studies when you're in your adolescence and getting into mischief. You know, your mischief shouldn't be, you know, harming anybody else. And I'll get into that. So, as I say, you shouldn't be constrained by, you know, what economic level you're born into, nor your dysfunctional family. And believe me, this is rampant among the upper class is the lower class. And that's the cycle that needs to be broken. And that's why I'm not being given a voice, because, you know, the feminists in the workplace, they want to have it all in positions of power there and take over the political, economic powers that be, whereas the, you know, the wives, and this is usually on the alt-right, conservatives who are married, and their income is contingent upon their husbands, don't like it either, because they're the Nancy Reagans. I mean, everybody in the United States has just been following the role model of Nancy Reagan, Joan Crawford, Ethel Kennedy, Rose Kennedy, and this is why it's being normalized on both sides. And usually left are the libertines. They don't want any rules, and they just want to party hardy. And the right are the control freaks. And believe me, they want to do their partying as well, but they just pop their pills, their pharmaceutical pills, you know, behind closed doors, and you know, drink fine wine and champagne and fine living to cover up for their lack of class. And that's how you treat people, and that I'll get into as well. This gets into the Kennedy family. So as I say, I'm still continuing in on, but I am deviating a little bit from what I was going to read, which gets into the politics, but then I'll get into that afterwards, because then that gets into how this is translated into the political situation that we're in at present. So this is from The Rise of the Fourth Reich of Jim Marrs. And I was looking for this because I know it's either in Dark Money or The Rise of the Fourth Reich, that it was early 1960s. The Koch brothers had a meeting and was like, we got to do something, because the Koch brothers even goes back to early, World War I. I don't want to deviate too much because I was looking at that as well today. So, so this is just a continuation on the trajectory that their family, because this is, again, gets into bloodline, family connections, family tree. So I don't see how, just changing who is the ruling dynasty, Koch brothers, Kennedys, has brought egalitarian principles. It hasn't, obviously. So, and this is the normalization of the principles set down by the robber barons and the Wild West and the Gold Rush, which usurped the Puritan worth ethics of the Puritans, Quakers, who had originally founded the country and who were the ones who, the founding fathers, the American Revolution. There were slaves in the South, and they may have fought, I'm not sure, but otherwise it was British against British, white against white in that war. And none of the huddled masses were really yet here, at least not in mass force, as they came in afterwards to cash in on the gold rush and the predatory industrial corporations and robber barons with Wall Street that grew up in the 1800s. So this goes back to how the right, the conservatives, a lot of the conservatives, not the alt-right conservatives, as well as the let's get away from the alt-left progressives, because I'm on, as I say, I can cross the aisle with the conservatives and agree with them on certain points and say, okay, yes, your premise is fine here, but you've deviated from implementing your goal, your premise, because of X, Y, and Z. And that has caused the backlash on the left. And they, instead of saying, wait a second, where we can agree on your original premise, but then where you're bringing it, you're faulty in your logic and your argumentation because of that X, Y, and Z that I come in with. And in fact, instead, they go off on an extremism agenda, because their objective is not equality for all, it's favoritism for my group. And why there's all the squabbling. And where, when the left finishes self-destroying and bringing the country further and further down to its knees. I mean, it's been going on for 40 years, if not 70, if not 200, because we're just repeating stuff from the past. Then, see, they have a whole bunch of different factions on the left. So at that point, chaos will be so great. That's when the alt-right, who can unify, I'll put that together, I won't say does, but can unify the white and white male, but white supremacists, basically. And the only reason that you'll find anybody within the Republicans that's not the whites is that they're cozying up to get favoritism there, because maybe their agenda is a little, their perspective is more conservative. But it's not about, as I say, the Republican Party wants power for a Republican Party, Democratic Party wants power for Democratic Party, and the Constitution, Bill of Rights, and American people be damned. So this gets into the different, if you want to bring we had all of these Nazis come in from, there's lots of wind, from Europe, from Germany afterwards, that were brought even by the CIA. I mean, this was, let's just welcome with open arms and get the ball rolling again. Because of course it was about industrial dominance over agrarian dominance, even with the Third Reich. It just happened to be in Germany that time. And now it's, now it's gotten factions not within Europe that divided up, or, created World War I and World War II. It's now gone global. And so you're going to have a unification amongst the Europeans and the Americans, old guard, with those vying for power, Russian, Asians under the Chinese, African, the South Africans, well, not under, but, it's for favoritism for that region, and that they come out the victor. And then Brazil has come up with South America and India. Middle East is a little more complicated, because India is, there you have Buddha or, Hindu, it's not Muslim. So, but it is that region. And I think probably, the Indians seem more buddy-buddy when the Europeans and Americans than the Muslims. And so that'll, end up, what you'll have is squabbles within those regions, but when it comes to the global domination, they become unified, as is always the case. So, this book gets into kind of the trajectory, but the Third Reich Ascendant, Part 3, Rebuilding the Reich American Style, Guns, Drugs, and Eugenics. So this is the recipe, the ingredients, if you will. And then here are the instructions of how you combine those ingredients to produce a soup that's explosive. So you get guns, drugs, and eugenics in there. Religion, you got to get involved in religion, because that is what, the moral authority and And you know, particularly the Americans, everybody just follows the leader. You know, this is what they're telling us to do. This is what we're going to do. That's why it's important to educate your populations to have some brains and not just sit there. Oh, a certain minority. I'm a big intellect. Give me all the money because I am going to solve the world's problems, and I'm doing good in the world. Well, I do here sit here and chew the fat with a bunch of other pretentious idiots. And I'm not saying that, you know, discussion and debate, philosophical debate, shouldn't occur. Oh, Lord, I've spent my life doing that. But I don't do it on taxpayers' dime or shareholder dime. I do it on my own dime. Even all the work that I've done in the past 15 years, my activism work, I haven't taken any money for. I don't have an NGO. I haven't solicited, you know, any kind of donor money. I got a PayPal on my war on domestic terrorism. It would be more than happy. Anybody wants to send me something, but it's not tax deductible, and I haven't gotten any, you know, anything yet. And first, I know any donor money, it comes with strings attached, and I would have to espouse their alt-right or their alt-left propaganda, and I won't do that. I'm also, I want to go to the courts. I'm sick and tired of, I mean, I'm doing a lot of artwork right now just because I'm kind of burned out after 15 years of 9 to 5, well, not even 9 to 5, 24/7, while holding 9 to 5 jobs. And when I have been unemployed, I take advantage of the time. I mean, if anybody looks at it, all of the letters, the videos that I've done, you know, all of the stuff that I've done since the shutdown. I mean, obviously I'm busy at work. I mean, spending 12 hours on videos per day, because of course you have, you know, you have to research stuff, you know, that's the dumb bimbos that come out on the platform, and, you know, without knowing anything that they're talking about, and they talk bullshit. And also, you know, I mean, I need to eat, I need to, it's just not possible for anyone, any person to, you know, be spend 8 hours a day discussing intellectual things or philosophical stuff. And anybody who does is not talking from their mouth, they're talking from the other end. So you got to get into religion, you got to get into education, you know, controlling the educational system and what's being taught, psychology and public control. Well, that gets a lot into with the internet now and the social media that's out there. And, you know, we've seen the dangers with Facebook. LinkedIn's gonna have its day as well. And propaganda, very important, the propaganda. And this, I want to get into a little bit of, you know, how women control the conversation. And traditionally did this, you know, in the feudal system, it was the upper, you know, the lords and the ladies and the duchess and dukes who, I mean, the rest were mainly peasants or artisans. They didn't have really any political or economic power. And it was the women, you know, who decide who's coming to this dinner, who's coming to this ball, who's invited to tea amongst the ladies, what topics of conversation are acceptable and appropriate in polite society. Oh Lord, have I walked off? let's just say I've had a lot of contention with the alt-right people and alt-left people in my family and entourage on that issue. Because I know many people believe that, and as I say, this is the alt-right and the alt-left. Anybody with a brain, a man out there as well, would agree, no, you're not going to bullshit anybody, but you present the issues in a calm manner and respectful manner to the person that you're addressing, whether it be God or those who think they're God in Congress or in the White House or anywhere else I encounter them. See, one of the advantages of growing up, not being a rags to riches story, but growing up amongst all of these people, because, oh Lord, when I was reading this stuff about the Kennedy family, I was cracking up. It's not funny, but I was cracking up because I was like, oh, this is why I left the United States in the 1980s. So, you know, all of these different things are, you know, we've had a very, 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 we've had very dysfunctional role models in this country. Yeah, as I say, for concision, and let's address, focalize where we have to focalize, we'll just put it into, you know, starting with World War II, and then particularly 60s, 70s, and 80s, where we've already gotten into that. But this is where the rise of really or let's just say the implantation of the Nazi Reichers in the United States after World War II. Now, this is Leone, I'm not sure exactly what his first name is. Noted, he's you know, I don't know, I mean, I don't want to say philosopher, but he is, you know, this is philosophical. Leone noted, educational results far exceeded those in modern schools. One only had to, yeah, okay. One only had to read old debates in the congressional record or scan the books published in the 1800s to realize that our ancestors of a century ago commanded a use of the language far superior to our own. Yeah, they actually used to. Even in my day, I was kind of horrified when I got to college and had to do some papers, you know, group papers, and what people would give me, because I said, okay, I'll type it up for everybody, but you know, you got to give me your portion. Not one was correctly written, you know, grammatically, and a lot of it made absolute no sense. One girl, I totally, because it was the night before, I only had to hand it in the next day, I totally made up what her portion of the presentation was supposed to be. I even went to the professor at the end, after we'd gotten the grade, and at the end of the course, and told him, I said, look, I usually never rattle my you know, classmates, but I just have to tell you, and I won't tell you who it is or whatever, you might have known. because the girl, oh my Lord. I said, but I was horrified. I've seen some badly written things here in college since I've been here in the 80s. But how did this girl get into college? How did she graduate from high school? This is GWU. And when I see, you know, a lot of these blogs and recipes, so I look at recipes, and it is really great to be able to Google, and I don't have to have a whole library of cookbooks to go through, because of course I don't have it. I got, well, maybe 3. But so that's nice. But I read through some of these recipes, the explanations, and I'm like, how did you graduate from high school? This is such improper English. It's not even funny. Now, if you go through my stuff, it needs editing, and I have grammar mistakes and all sorts of stuff all over the place. My only, you know, defense is I've produced thousands and thousands and thousands of pages of you know, putting together all the information. My objective has not been to gain any literary prize, and I'll be the first to admit it needs editing. But you know, I'm working on myself and do what I possibly can. However, except for, you know, some stuff, little stuff, everything that you read through, any person with a brain and a little bit of education can follow and understand, and no problem. The big worry is that I've sent all of these letters to all of these people, and no one, and you know, the leaders of our country and of the world understands basic principles of you know, basic legal principles of economics, in the case of those that it's directed, good governance. You know, I'm all over the map, and so I got letters, but or they're playing, we'll see later, which is actually the game. They don't know how to deal with this situation if they do understand what I'm talking about, and don't want to get burned and just want to protect their ass. So, you know, in the early colonial period, the ruling elite, their children and their children's children were educated. You know, this is how the Ivy League schools began, because it was to educate the American ruling elite to be just as educated and sophisticated. I don't think they really ever got there. Well, I don't know, because you can argue the Europeans were really crass and exploitative in some of, you know, you look at some of the Rococo periods and Baroque periods, even though I love a lot of that stuff. And it's very, very opulent, and which is, of course, more money to produce this type of opulence in living, whether it be your architecture, your china, your cuisine, your clothes, all of it. And as I say, it's always about a balance. You know, I'm not proposing to go back to the gray garb of the Puritans that is reminiscent of the communists in Russia and China. So that extremism is not, you know, it's not sustainable, and it's not a healthy one. It's not a healthy paradigm. So students learn how to read not comic books, but although some of the cartoons are pretty good. The political stuff, and even the comic books can give some good messages. However, not just comic books, but the essays of Burke, Webster, Lincoln, Horace, Cicero. Their difficulties with grammar were overcome long before they graduated from school, and any review of a typical elementary school arithmetic textbook printed before 1910 shows dramatically that students were learning mathematical school skills that few of our current high school graduates know anything about. The high school graduate of 1900 was an educated person, fluent in his language, at least his maternal language. I mean, the Americans have never been known for, you know, their ability to speak foreign languages. In fact, that's something that always, even to this day, people are like, how do you speak French and Spanish like that? Because you are obviously a gringa, or in the French case, an Ameriloc. The high school graduate or fluent in language, history, and culture, possessing the skills he needed in order to succeed. See, wouldn't be about some techie who could sit there for 12 hours, but has no idea about anything other than you know, his economic or his you know, mathematical formulas or computer language and all of those things. And they, you know, they're just as dangerous as the industrialist. And I remember when I was looking at Shark Tank, when I came back and I was looking at that, and I mean, it was, as I say, a couple of series, it was kind of amusing to see that, but then I was like, you're kidding me, right? People are, and this is how money is being distributed and investment decisions are being made. But everything that, and these are supposed to be some big gurus of, you know, our great entrepreneurs in this country. Oh, these people are idiots. Just like everybody else, they don't understand the function of marketing, and all they're into, I mean, it's gadgets, you know, manufacturer gadgets for normally, you know, home consumer type home consumption. And of course, the problem with these things, it's always the distribution. And I mean, I can get into, for example, with my Global Expats project, originally had wanted to do export of artisan products. Start with Colombia, but I love artisan products everywhere, and I've seen them everywhere. So, you know, eventually I wanted to build it globally, and with trailing spouses all over the world, and do a Global Expats Wives Club, and start challenging the FACO and FIAF and the IMF Family Association, who just want to sit around and are in bed with the corporate greed and the warmongering governments and increasing dictatorial governments, instead of working for the people who pay their salaries with taxpayers' money, and subverting the mission of the organization, just like those in Washington are subverting the U.S. Constitution and Bill of Rights. So education is and good education, and having a population that how can I explain it? Academic education is important. But without appropriate socialization of children, because children, when babies are born, they're completely egocentric, narcissistic. I mean, I won't use the word psychopathic because that comes into the pathology, but a baby that is recently born, only thing that they know is they're uncomfortable. Now, that can be hunger, that can be they're tired, or that can be that they've soiled themselves. And that's all this little baby understands. And that is exactly why the socialization process of, Homo sapiens, which is the longest of any of the animals in the entire planet, and it is very, very long, because the educational process, and which is part of the socialization process, teach them first, okay, how to also get yourself to sleep. But that is something they also have to learn. But they're sitting there going, wait a second, I'm not happy here. And as I say, they don't know why. Now, that's also, well, it's usually time now for you probably to go to sleep. You're newborn. Whoa. And a lot of times they'll do it, oops, that might happen naturally. Some other babies, they need more time there. So as I say, I won't use the word psychopaths, but they have no conscience of other people or anything in this world. And that is little by little. And particularly, that's why it's important. And normally it's the mother, but if the mother's not there, it can be, other that they can build bonds with, but there's usually, it's got to be consistently. I mean, you just can't pass the kid around, but it doesn't have to be one, but it usually is, let's just say, it's the mother. And they become aware that there is another person in this world. So first, they're aware of the person in this world. They still don't think, I mean, they're not aware. They're not even aware of their own feelings right now. So of course, they're not aware that this person is anything other than another self. I mean, if you go into all of child psychology, and as I keep on telling anybody who's pregnant, men and women, read Dr. Spock's book of what the process is and what's going on psychologically as well as physically, because that you also have to address those issues and make sure that they my Bibles became Dr. Spock and Adele Davis, and eating and diet and preventative medicine for my children to make sure that they were healthy, and that they got sick, normally. Colds, oh Lord. You want to see a petri dish of colds, just go to a kindergarten room. And when you travel from country to country, when you're expats, new strains everywhere you go. So when you get to a new country, they're going to catch all of those colds. But you do not give them antibiotics under any circumstances for a cold If your doctor tries to do it, telling a frickin' or her that she's frickin' crazy, antibiotics do not cure colds, and it is counterproductive, because then when you really do have a problem, then that the antibiotics can address, your body's produced an immune system. So you need something stronger and stronger and stronger. It's like with all the drugs. So, it is important, the work that mothers do, and fathers, but the socialization and the education process, and being there supportive of the child through that process, through the different stages, and progressively the child becomes more and more and more autonomous. Now with my kids, I mean, I don't like to think about this, and let's talk about it. But because I just thank the Lord that when they were separated from me, they were 15, 14, 15, 16. And I had been there in the younger years and the formative years, and I know there's many like, what's the big deal? I remember one woman had told me, one victim of the courts had told me that the judge had like even screamed at her to shut up. What's the big deal, lady? Just go out and have some more kids. Well, when I started hearing the stories, I was like, oh my God, our courts are filled with psychopaths. So, it's important who you have in power, and it's important that they are properly educated in terms of academic education, as well as moral education, which they receive from the parents. I mean, it can be an outside influence, but normally, as I say, there are people who, I grew up in a really dysfunctional family, and however, my father was again, he was the role model, and I decided to follow in the life path, or how shall I say it, the dignity of my father, rather than my siblings who have chosen the path of my mother. I mean, it's this is where I guess we can say environment versus DNA comes in, or free will. I guess I don't know if it comes down to the same thing, but you can decide to continue on with the sins of the father and mother, as I say, or you can say, well, I'm not going to do that. It was what it was, not it is what it is. It was what it was, and it sure, there's pain that comes along with it, and you have to deal with that and face that on a personal level. And believe me, you don't do it by getting on a podium and pouring your heart out to the world so that they'll tell you how brave you are. People who do that are just looking for the limelight. Oh, I'm so tired of it. So you can decide that no more. Not happening on my watch. But be sincere about it, not like George and Amal Clooney. So the agenda behind Rockefeller's creation of the GEB may have been revealed in correspondence from Frederick T. Gates, Rockefeller's choice to head the board. So this is, gets into, it's Paolo Leone, author of the Leipzig Connection, 1993 book that traces the deleterious effects of experimental psychology on the educational system, back to German professor of psychology Wilhelm Max Wundt, the founder of experimental psychology. So that's how this guy's bringing it back to how they did it for the rise of the Third Reich. We'll use it again. So Gates wrote, "In our dreams, we have limitless resources, and the people yield themselves with perfect docility to our molding hands. The present educational conventions fade from their minds, and unhampered by tradition, we work our own goodwill upon a grateful and responsive rural folk. We shall not try to make these people or any of their children into philosophers or men of learning or men of science. We shall not search for embryo great artists, painters, musicians, nor lawyers, doctors, preachers, politicians, statesmen, of whom we have an ample supply." Which is true. This gets into managerialism. And Burnham, James Burnham, American philosopher, 1941, clearly showed the greatest problem of our time is managerialism, not communism versus capitalism, which I argue ad nauseum is, first, capitalism today is not capitalism as they claim, Adam Smith capitalism. I would sit there and argue that, but again, I don't think it should be done on taxpayers' time with all of these great philosophers who have their head where it don't shine, where the sun don't shine, as we used to say. We do have too many of those, and that's why, and the libertines just want more and more and more and more. The Mandeville economics versus Adam Smith economics, and why the agrarian and the manual workers are getting pissed off because more money is going into all of these people for bullshit, making more and more cacophony and living the good life and showing how they can live the ladder of success, great urban luxury living, and become rich and famous like every person on this earth wants to be. So of course they're getting upset. I'm getting pissed off. I just prefer using the la plume instead of the sword to fight my battles. The task we set before ourselves is very simple, as well as very beautiful, as well as a very beautiful one. To train these people as we find them to a perfectly ideal life just where they are. So we will organize our children and teach them to do in a perfect way the things their fathers and mothers are doing in an imperfect way, in the homes, in the shops, and on the farm. Paolo Leone wrote, "It would be false to say J.D. Rockefeller was the mastermind of international intrigue and deception, but it wouldn't be false to say that the Rockefeller money had been used in various ways to forward social and global control through economics, foundations, the United Nations, universities, banking, industry, medicine, and of course, education, psychology, and psychiatry. And yes, you know, as this Gates guy, I'm not sure what his first name that they quote here. There is the ability and even the obligation of the government. This is not, because if it's about, you know, mind control, power and control, to be able to render your population stupid or submissive, as is the case at present and has been the case by this Fourth Reich, you know, by the alt right and the alt left as much, and now they're squabbling. For example, the whole thing, there was a big scandal of parent teacher association or something like that, and people being ejected and being silenced, the parents being silenced because they don't like some of the things that are being taught in schools. And some of the stuff is real wacko. Yeah, they were justified in what they were getting upset about. But the LGBT community, you know, and alt right are all no. We want to control what's being, you know, taught in schools. And of course, you do have to have some sort of control over what's being taught in schools. I mean, one of my things with the expats, because the best or the most common systems that you'll find in, and even a lot of other countries around the world have kind of copied this system. So you might even find these systems locally where your kids can, you know, but the three basic systems you'll find are the British educational systems, the British, the French, and the American. And as I tell people, because you're always, the British and American schools, they're not, they're all independent. And so they're all independently run. There is, you know, they have certification and stuff, but they're not, it's kind of all over the map in quality and kind of what they can teach, and within the French system, it's under the French government, le lycée français. And in fact, one of the advantages, if you're French, my husband, or my ex-husband, myself, and my kids were all French. So like, even when we got to Bogota and last minute, oh no, we're here with our two kids, sorry, there's no room. My kids are French. Oh, well, okay, let me see where I fit them in. Oh, we were both shocked. I mean, okay, he's the Spanish French guy, and I'm the Amerloc French person who say, oh no, you have to find space for our kids because we're both French and they're both French. Although we became very good friends with them, at least some, you know, like the director of the École Primaire, and I, you know, the kindergarten teachers, l'école maternelle, they were just absolutely wonderful. But we were told, and both of us afterwards, when we walked out, we just looked at each other and was like, ha, is that any surprise? But we were told that that okay, they you know, they find a place for our sons, but it wouldn't be with a French teacher, it would be one of the Colombian teachers. I mean, they all spoken, and some of them had even gone to the French school, so it wasn't like they didn't speak French. I mean, one did have an accent, oh God. But the one of the French moms was like, oh, my daughter is mispronouncing a word. God, your daughter is learning 2 languages. Idiot. So anyway, like this was going to be a problem that our kids would be put into the class with a Colombian instead of a French. And my husband and I were like, yeah, that's fine. Yeah. We were kind of shocked by the thing, but then after we walked out, I don't know who said first was like, well, does that surprise you? Because both of us are immigrants within the French community. So say, I know what it's like to be an immigrant and to have, you know, to see the discriminatory stuff from the other end, because believe me, oh, I got it from the Spanish as well, even if I'm not, you know, don't have a Spanish nationality. My ex and my Spanish politica family are all Spanish. I mean, you know, the only thing that I'm missing is the paper. Not I'm even, I don't know, maybe I'm more Colombian than I am Spanish. You know, after you move around so often, see, in a lot of people, this creates an identity crisis. And I saw that with my ex-husband and his family, his Spanish, you know, immigrant in France family. I mean, they were immigrants, well, they were refugees in Morocco, so that's a little different. So I've seen it from kind of all sides and can understand, but I'll get back to, you know, how it's really important. And either way we cut it, our educational systems, you know, are there to mold our children. However, they have to stop being there either just as a you know, place to stick these kids until they get 18 or 16 or whatever age they're dropping out, as cheap babysitting for to income families, and a better public education system. I mean, I'm horrified by the whole charter school trend. I even saw this at the spring meetings 2016, IMF World Bank spring meetings 2016, and there were some Africans there, and they were complaining about this charter school trend. And you know, it said it come from the United States, and that's when I started looking at it in the United States, and it's no, this is perpetuating this, get them into a school of, you know, prestige, and we're going to guarantee their success, their economic success in life, because who cares about their personal success? You know, that's not a concern. It's just all about economics and making money. So this is why, you know, I got no problem, and I'm sure the left would be like, oh, see, they don't want the artistic injection of, and you know, they want to censor poets and you know, great literature and these things. No, we got too many of them already. One of the things that's pissing me off is all the people in my life, my mother, and this guy who lives here, Jim Reed. I mean, 2 peas in a pod on this issue. I mean, you know, my mom had worked on a play, and she had worked, but I won't get into all of that. But you know, again, this, you know, could read. They had 3,000 books, but she couldn't put it all together. She'd have some good ideas, but she wanted to be in total control of everything and couldn't put it all together. And you know, so has resented me. I mean, in the past 15 years, I mean, okay, now she's deceased, but in the 15 years, she hadn't produced anything. She hadn't advanced at all in her project, just reading and reading and reading and reading. And like I do, not my books. I mean, I don't have 3,000 plays for it. With notes all over the place of this and that and my comments. But then I do also put it all together in reports, in action plans, in implementation of building cases for the courts, of going up to Congress, of going to how many meetings and, you know, seminars and group discussions and action committees. I attended over about a 6 period. I mean, it was 2009 I started. By 2015, it was Carrie Bettinger Lopez at the October 2015 National Coalition Against Domestic Violence cocktail party, which was the last straw. I just said, you know what? I'm done. I'm not wasting any more time with any of you ladies. If I want something to eat or a glass of wine, I can buy it myself. And I could buy some really nice wine and really nice food if you people weren't screwing around so much, and I could get some justice in this world and stop instead being massacred in Washington in labor and housing markets, while you little ladies, ka-ching, 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 sit around doing nothing but espousing more and more bullshit and telling the world how great you are. I mean, I have, since 2011, Carrie Bettinger Lopez, her case, she was a lead counsel on Gonzalez Linehan versus USA. Now, this is the first jurisprudence on violence against women is human rights violations. Now, I've already been, since 2007, because I saw from the beginning, okay, I hadn't looked at, you know, I was in the war zone. So, you know, it was just survival mode, but I was starting to examine, but I was like, everything you people doing here is totally illegal, totally illegal. I mean, just, you know, every time I turn around, I'd be like, whoa. Have you people ever heard of due process? Have you ever heard of the penal codes? Have you ever heard of the civil codes? I started on constitutions and international conventions. And when I got back to the States and I really dug into my research after I'd gotten out of Spain alive and gotten a roof over my head and started working at the IMF Family Association, I got jealous of how competent and how hardworking I was. So took credit for all my work and ousted me, like is habitual custom in Washington with, you know, Robert F. Kennedy's human rights organization just down the street, promoting since the 1968, defending the rights of American citizens, well, not even American citizens. I'd have to look at them. Hold on, a mission. Because they all have very noble missions. It's all bullshit. And you know, everybody is basically looking at lawsuits on fraud, because let's see. I know I was looking at this. No, this is not on Wikipedia. Wikipedia is better. Oh, come on. No, it's not. Sorry. So, you know, they all have these wonderful, grandiose missions. Nobody's implementing, as the UN Women, excuse me, not UN Women report, UN report on in-depth study on domestic violence, excuse me, violence against women. It shows all of these things. It's just window dressing. And it's the domestic violence industry is as much as the human rights industry, because I've been knocking at the door of both of them since 2007, starting with Amnesty International in Spain. So, let's see, I think it had its mission here. It looked to, this is a Robert, well, this is in Robert F. Kennedy Memorial. It was a nonprofit. It was originally called that. And it looked to memorialize Robert Kennedy's public service following his assassination. Well, I don't know. I mean, memorialize, normally you do that with a statue or something. But, you know, in principle, you could do it with actions. But so Fred Dutton was named as executive director. Peter Elderman was associate director, and then chairman and executive committee was former U.S. Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara. Yeah, well, okay, I won't get into Robert McNamara right now. So that the organization would be a living memorial that would work in areas of poverty, crime, and education in America. But, you know, if you look in there, I mean, most of it, and this, I think the trend really started under Wolfson at the World Bank of eradicating poverty. But eradicating poverty means eradicating poverty in countries elsewhere than the United States. I don't know, we more than welcome income inequality and rising income inequality and rising poverty in the United States. And so we'll just use all of these organizations to detract attention away from the shit show that's going on in the United States and show how benevolent and charitable we are by helping all of these, you know, it's pennies to what's being, you know, done to maintain the Fourth Reich in terms of, you know, what NSA, the you know, the weapons, you know, for them this is pocket change what they're throwing out stuff like this, but it maintains the facade of them working, doing good in the world. I want to vomit every time I hear one of these charity producing people, how much good in the world that they're doing. And it was in the 60s, 70s that, I mean, I even remember that from that had to be in high school when it was a third, then it wasn't politically incorrect, it was called Third World. It was Mr. Frost who gave that class. And it was The Lonely African by Colin Powell that I read. But it was the that you had to stop this charity-based system don't teach or don't give a man a fish, teach him how to fit, teach him how to fish, and then he can feed himself type of the motto. And you do have to come up with these short little mottos to express your ideas. But then behind that little acronym or that little motto or however you want to call it, you better have some substance, because otherwise it's a bunch of bullshit. So the development community and all of these is just charity, so that the Fourth Reichers can make themselves look good and clear their conscience about all the crap that they're doing, the damage that they're doing with their own children and their own marriages and their spouses, or in their place of work or economies. I mean, the higher up the echelon you get, the greater damage that one can do to the country, to the economy, and of course. And that's why they want these protected positions, because they know they're not, they know that they're not as intelligent and knowledgeable as they pretend to be. So they have to have a protection, group of people who would just keep on bowing and scraping to them and tell them how wonderful they are and giving them awards and certificates and feeding into their egos. So your educational systems, religion, one of the problems is nobody goes to church anymore. Oh, I'm not a church goer by any means. But I don't know, I have enough of a moral compass inside myself that's not religiously based. In fact, religious institutions have always angered me because I find them totally hypocritical, because they do not implement the words of their founders, Muhammad or Jesus Christ. And Jewish gets a little bit more complicated because that goes kind of back to Adam and Eve, and we have to get into more little philosophical. But my point being, in that case, I guess it's God. So I don't, and I tried to adhere to those principles. Oh, well, I like everybody else. I get angry and I'm like, I want to kill her, like my little sister when we were young. But I learned to control my murderous rages, pulling of her hair and cat fights. That was part. I mean, anybody who tells me my siblings and I, no, we never fought, we never hit each other or any of that, I'd be like, either you're lying or you must come from a very, very, very like control freak home. I don't know what's going on there, but that's not normal. And part of bringing up children and being the parent, and that's why it's important to have a mom that's around. And isn't that quality time? I mean, so much of my time was letting the kids run around and play amongst themselves, because they do have to learn how to interact with others their age, and also deal with some of the situations, communication or bullies or anything that's going on, and deal with that. And part of being the supervising parent or teacher or whatever telling these kids as well. And if somebody comes running and says, he hit me, or she hit me, he hit me. Okay, now you better stop hitting. Now I want to know what you did to instigate it. Instead of, you hit somebody, I don't want to deal with the problem that went on here, so I'm just gonna, punish the one who hit somebody. Well, this is, later in life at upper echelons, this gets into waterboarding type crap. If you follow my analogy of the progression of violence. So you want to learn how to socialize children when they're young to have a moral compass. To you do not hit and you do not instigate. And you learn to live in harmony together. And you learn to come to agreement, amongst yourselves. Because, I can't be sitting here the entire time going, okay, that's a dictatorship. But it's a process. You cannot expect a 3-year-old to have the same self-control as 6-year-olds, as 10-year-olds, as 15-year-olds, as 20-year-olds, 30-year-olds. And I'm tired of dealing with supposed adults that have no more brains than kindergarten children and think they're God's gift to the world. So it's not incorrect to say that a major segment of today's modern institutions exists not because of honest study and concern for the truth in respective fields, but because Rockefeller's money was available at their inception to fund incredible PR campaigns, establish professional publications and societies, steamroller over any competition, regardless of their legitimacy or value, and continue selling the ideas until accepted and institutionalized within the basic fabric of society. I mean, this is an indoctrination. What I'm trying to point out here is that's part of the role of the ruling elite, government, religion, is a certain amount of indoctrination. But at the same time, because you have to teach, the basis of the language, grammar, math, basic skills. And when they get that down, then you also get into, okay, now what are you interested in? Because everyone needs, primary school. And I'm very lucky. I mean, I consider myself lucky. I had a good, solid education from day one. And the schools, I mean, socialization problems came in with, my mother's methods of, and I want to get into that, and I don't want to get in too long, but so this whole thing of it's an indoctrination process. Well, of course it's an indoctrination process. That's part of what socialization is about. And that's what part of gossiping is about, whether it be at the country clubs or all of these different experts and philosophers. And I mean, okay, a lot of this is, dark money is much more just reporting. But all of this, but it's important to have a population that is indoctrinated enough to not act like animals and pimps and whores and just hedonism all over the place. Let's get laid and let's jet set around the world. And, you know, we get to buy all of these luxury goods all over the world and then come home and show everybody how sophisticated and classy and cultured we are because we have all of this, you know, material stuff. Well, you treat everybody around you like a piece of shit. And violate people's rights and just more money, and total immorality. And believe me, one of the things that is a certainty, taxes and death. And you can't take it with you. Even if you get them to put you a tomb and then put it all in there. Check out Cash Peters' transition pictures and contact Cash Peters and ask them if they allow moving trucks through the tunnel and into the orb of light. No, they don't go through. You're back to your birthday suit. And you just gotta the face the music of whatever you did here in your life. So you may have a good time partying, but there is, even if you don't have to pay the piper here, you pay the piper elsewhere. Now you can say I don't believe in any of that, and I don't believe in God, and we're just here to live and die, and I'm like, okay, well, I guess that's kind of no different than the animals out there, right? I don't know. I think, see, there's this whole debate of what's the difference between Homo sapiens and the rest of the animal kingdom. And, you know, nobody really comes to a consensus on this. I think one of the few differences, I mean, because I'm not sure like about dolphins and because they have very high intelligence, but I'm pretty sure we are the only ones who are aware of our own mortality. And maybe that's so that we can know, well, eventually we all will die. And maybe what's important is not how or when we die, but how we lived. And I you know, some people can say, well, yeah, I mean, I eat a lot of fancy food. I got to have lots of people who worshipped me. I guess that, you know, that comes into what is your objective. I mean, I just kind of like, well, it sounds to me like pretty empty life. You know, at least the other animals on the planet, they only eat what they need to survive and consume what they need instead of being gluttonous like that. So anyway, that's a tremendous amount of control and involvement for one group. What if the theories and practice they funded and continue to fund are fundamentally flawed and don't lead to the best possible situations in the various fields mentioned? Well, the views in most of those areas are fundamentally flawed and they don't lead to the best solutions in mental health, education, medicine, sanity, and happiness. But most likely, despite all humanitarian posturing, they were never intended to. So we can go into debates on each of these different individuals, you know, whether it be the Kochs, the Rockefellers, you know, what the intentions of these people, were they good, were they evil? I mean, that's basically what it comes down to. I mean, I think there are a lot of well-intentioned people throughout the centuries. It just, has either been caught up in the same conflicts that we're seeing today and same dynamics. I think there are some well-intentioned people in cesspool, but I know from my own experience, and I understand. In fact, there's something I want to read. Oh gosh, I've gone on, I think, I'm trying to cut these things down because I don't, nobody can look more than a tweet. But to explain why, I'm silenced, and why nobody will give me, a voice or a job or even recognize my existence. Because if they're either on the right or the left, this is what they're aware of. And maybe I'll leave it for that today and then get into this with Ethel Kennedy tomorrow, because I have gone on a while, and as I say, I'm trying to make these not too long so they don't get too convoluted and people can break it down. I know they need to go in, and there's a lot of administrative work to be done, but I just, I'm exhausted. So I do triage. Some of the biggest men in the United States in the field of commerce and manufacture are afraid of somebody, are afraid of something. They know there is a power somewhere so organized, so subtle, so watchful, so interlocked, so complete, so pervasive, that they had better not speak above their breath when they speak in condemnation of it. President Franklin D. Roosevelt once wrote, "The real truth of the matter is, as you and I know, that a financial element in the large centers has owned the government ever since the days of Andrew Jackson." Colonel F. Fletcher Prouty, a liaison officer between the Pentagon and the CIA in the 1960s, was able to witness the control mechanism over both intelligence and the military. Prouty said the United States is run by a secret team, answerable only to themselves. Their power is derived from their vast, covert, intra-governmental infrastructure and its direction connections with private industry, mutual funds, investment houses, well, mutual funds, no, hedge funds, same difference, which is a scary thought, but it is. Investment houses, universities, and the news media, including foreign and domestic publishing houses. Prouty would have been horrified to learn this secret team might include Nazis brought into the military industrial complex after the war. Another insider who confirmed that a plot was afoot was President Truman's choice for America's first Secretary of Defense, James Forrestal, a man intimately connected with the globalists. Forrestal noted, "These men are not incompetent or stupid. They are crafty and brilliant. Consistency has never been a mark of stupidity. If they were merely stupid, they would occasionally make a mistake in our favor. They do not make mistakes that favor the best interest of the American people. Okay, this gets into examples. I don't want to get into. So I'll jump forward here. In mid 2007, this is from Putin. At the 43rd Munich Conference on Security Policy. For the first time in history, Putin said, there are elements of the US nuclear capabilities on the European continent. It simply changes the whole configuration of international security. Of course, we have to respond to that, criticizing Bush's war on terror. Putin also produced a copy of a report from Amnesty International and stated the organization has concluded that the United States is now the principal violator of human rights and freedoms worldwide. See, it's all the pot calling the kettle black. I'm sorry, it makes me crack up. It reminds me of children in the kindergarten. He's worse than I. He did it. It's like, you guys have put the bar so freaking low. How can you determine who is worse than the other guy? Okay. As I say, it's not funny. But ask any of the victims of any kind of abuses of power. I don't care if it's in the home, community, workplace, court, anyway. Either, like, this is the example. This is a case study then of what I've been talking about today, of the Kennedy family. You'll see that if you don't develop a sense of humor and come out with really sick jokes, I mean, sometimes I'm like, oh my God, that's really sick. But, you know, it's a defense mechanism as well of having to deal with the horrific situation, which is actually much more a much more functional defense mechanism. I mean, of course, I'm going to be laughing at every horror in the world, but when you get involved in trying to make a change and really and real activism work, and I'm not talking about getting on a frickin' podium, and this is where Megyn Kelly is off her mark on what activism is and what the activists are about. They're not activists, they're fame and, you know, fortune seekers. You have to develop a certain, you know, a sense of humor. Otherwise, you will commit suicide, because it's you know, if you take on all the pains of everybody, it destroys you. The other flip side, which is what we see with the Kennedy family, is just pretend, and my family, just pretend like no problem here. Nothing exists. We're all fine. Everything's fine. Everything's good. Everything's good. No, that is highly dysfunctional as well, and leads to either psychopathologies or of those who embrace the power over paradigm, or substance abuse for those around them. And it doesn't matter what's your skin color, what's your culture, what's your nationality, what your gender is. That's something that is very, it's universal, at least amongst the Homo sapiens. As I say, I don't know. Does anybody really know what a dog thinks about or what a cat thinks about? I don't know. As I think, it's kind of like the baby. I'm hungry, or I'm threatened, or I'm tired, or whatever. It's the basic survival instincts and not much else. So anyway, that as I say, I loved it. And this is what year is this? This is 2007. So this is still Bush. You're the worst human rights violator on the planet. I mean, it just, don't these guys get embarrassed ever? I don't think so. Anyway, okay, I'll be back tomorrow with this part of it, on the Kennedy and the case study part. See, you need the theory and you need the academic stuff, but then you need to know how to apply it to real life situations. And oh Lord, the Kennedy family. As many as the European royalties coming down from Victoria. This is one of the reasons I'm having to do my artwork, because I'm like, oh my God, there's too many of you. Even I can't keep it straight. I need a whole huge spreadsheet and a computer program to put all this together. So anyway, okay, have a nice day. Oh, and please wear your masks. Sorry. This is another thing that, does serve as a mask. So have a nice day. Bye-bye.